predict the future. I discovered this superpower when I was in high school. And my first ever prediction was my class would pass in its mathematics. And it came true. We actually passed. It costed me all my free time because I had to show my classmates over and over what the teacher had just taught us. But the fact is, my prediction came true, so I can predict the future. And it wasn't a hassle for me because I love numbers. I love how they're straight to the point. I love how 1 + 1 is always 2 and how 2 + 2 is always 4. And so when it came time for us to choose what we wanted to do in university, I knew I wanted to do something with mathematics. I knew I didn't want to be a teacher and I didn't want to do accountancy, but I wanted to apply mathematics. Then I learned about something called actuarial science. For those of you who don't know, actuarial science is this amazing subject where you spend your days doing calculus and statistics and probability, and you're just immersed in numbers. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that for life? And so I applied to do actuarial science, and before we did our final exams, I was also diagnosed with epilepsy. But this didn't deter my dream. I sat for my final exams and I passed and I went to university, and it was me and actuarial science for life. After my first year, I unfortunately had to drop out of university because I became too sick and I didn't have the right information on how to live with my diagnosis. And the people around me didn't know how to treat me. And so it increased the stigma, and my future with actuarial science looked like it would be no more. Until a family friend introduced me to a friend of his who owned an insurance company. What we do in actuarial class is we calculate things like mortality rate. If I finished school, I would actually sit down with my calculator and almost tell you guys when you die, because we'd look at certain things that would help us calculate these things. And so when I was told I'll be able to work in insurance, I got excited because that meant that the things that my classmates were trying to understand from a formula point of view, I was actually going to do them hands-on. I remember the weekend just before I was to report for duty. I spent it working on my mismatched suit. You see, I didn't have enough money to have a proper suit, but I had a suit mismatched, but it was a suit. And I spent my Saturday just going through the pleats of my skirt as I thought of my dream and my life with actuarial science and all the people's mortality rates that we'd calculate. And so on Monday, I reported for duty, and I met the director's assistant, who was almost my age, and we became really good friends. We even made it a ritual that every morning would come a little earlier than everybody else so that we could touch base and exchange notes. Then something really interesting happened. The company got a really amazing contract, and that meant all of us had to report over the weekend so that everything was ready by Monday morning meeting. That Friday afternoon, we spent the day learning how to use a photocopier. They bought a fancy new machine so that we could do all the paperwork in time for Monday morning meeting. And as we were leaving, everybody was given their assignment. And I got the honorable duty of working with a brand new photocopier. And I couldn't wait for Saturday morning when everybody went around to do everything else. And I would just be there with a ream of papers and the fancy new machine. And so Saturday morning came and everybody went to their workstations, and I walked in and I was ready to do the paperwork. When I was diagnosed, the doctor said that I have to watch out for 3 things. That I have to make sure that I ate well, that I slept well, and I never missed my medication. I followed this very religiously. And I had done the same thing that morning when I walked into the office. And I remember checking to make sure that the copier had enough papers. And I put in the first paper that I had to photocopy. But I can't remember what really happened in between. But I found myself in the hospital. So it means I had had a seizure, and I had been rushed to hospital. I later learned that I have photosensitive epilepsy, that me standing in front of the copier and the beam light actually caused a trigger, and I had a seizure, and I was taken to hospital. Because I had a known history of epilepsy, there was no need for me to be admitted, and I was asked to go home. I went home. I felt like I'd let the team down, and I couldn't wait for Monday morning to redeem myself. So on Monday, I went back to the office, and the lady at the front desk told me that I had been given 2 weeks to rest. I was really excited because I was doing what I wanted to do. I was working towards my dream job, and my dream job came with sick days. Days that you're told to go home and rest. Who wouldn't want to do actuarial science? And so I went home and I counted down the 14 days. And when they were done, the next Monday, I went back to the office. And again, the lady at the front desk told me that I had been given 2 more weeks. But this time, I wasn't really excited when I went home, because this 2 plus 2 wasn't really adding up to 4 in my head. And so in the evening, I called the director's assistant and asked her if she'd had the director speak about me or my case and when I was going to go back to work. And after a brief moment of silence, she told me the director had said that they couldn't work with someone like me. That meant that they couldn't work with someone with a health condition like mine. And then she further added that he was thinking of telling the guy who had introduced us to be the one to break the news to me. And it really broke my heart because he didn't have the courage and the respect to face me and tell me these things, that he wanted to use someone else to tell me that I had been fired. And so when we hung up, I cried, and I cried some more. And I had so much pain and anger in me. And one of the many things I told myself was that I would never want to work for anyone ever again. And I put all that pain and anger on paper. And I moved it from paper and I put it online on my blog. And before I knew it, I was the go-to girl for people like me. And everybody who was like me came to me and told me what they'd gone through, what they're going through. And this girl who at some point had been seen as an unemployable was able to employ 5 people when she ran the first free support helpline here in Kenya. I can still predict the future. Not with numbers though, but with my voice. And with my voice, I speak about the things that I have seen and the things that I have experienced. I can predict an Africa where people like me, people living with epilepsy, are able to receive appropriate support and get proper information. I predict a future where people like you look at people like me and want to come a little bit closer and learn a little more about us, and learn a little more about the things we go through, and learn that if I touched you or if I worked with you, you don't get this thing in me. And this thing in me only puts me down for 20 minutes, and after that, I'm ready to rise up and continue to contribute to the development of this beautiful continent. I can predict an Africa where there are no people like you and there are no people like me. An Africa that just has people. Thank you.